Hey everybody, this is Steven from PopCultureMaven.com, and we're back with this week's new comic book reviews. Once again, as I hold up the giant stack of new comics, it just never seems to end. There's just so many comics that come out. So hopefully we'll be able to figure out what to buy, what to skip, what is an iffy. So we'll get right to it. There's just a ton to get here. So first up, we have Good Luck #1, written by Matthew Ehrman, with artwork by Stefano Simone. Now, it's interesting that this book was called Good Luck. So the basic premise is that, there's kind of good luck and bad luck, and then there's this group of kids who have bad luck that are able to, they're part of a team that's going to help, give balance to like the good and bad luck. I think the shame here is Ehrman has like a really interesting idea. There's kind of two problems that I had with it. First of all, the dialogue is just so thick and heavy. There's so much dialogue that there's a lot of panels in the artwork that just have way too much dialogue. Now, I get that, he's trying to explain stuff and trying to get the exposition across, but he just inundates you so much that it's so thick that the story just kind of gets lost in the whole thing, which, is kind of a shame, because I think I think the premise is actually good. I do think part of the thing is it might have been wise to maybe split this first story up into two issues, not to pad it out, but to even it out. That might have been a possible idea. I don't know. I will give that Simone's artwork is actually really nice. It actually does complement the story really nice. It does a good job of kind of keeping it moving along, considering the dense dialogue and the overall slowness pacing of the story. And it's I don't think it's bad. It's just kind of disappointing, and it just doesn't quite elevate itself enough to like a buy. It was interesting, and it's kind of a shame because, I think it had some good ideas, but just didn't quite pan out. Next up, we have Vinyl #1, written by Doug Wagner, with artwork by Daniel Hilliard. Now, this is the same team who did the miniseries Plastic a while back, and the best way I can kind of describe it, it's kind of like it's kind of a horror. It's a horror comic that is also crossed with like a cult thing. It's actually really interesting, although it is one of those first issues that you're kind of like not sure what to think of the whole thing, which is kind of, pretty interesting. I mean, it gets a little like, okay, what is going on here? But I did like the concept here of, there's this like, murderer, and then he gets involved with this cult because they kidnapped his daughter, and that's kind of the basic setup in this first issue. Like I said, the story is a bit kind of off, but it's supposed to, it's intentionally done that. It kind of catches you off guard a little bit, and that's kind of part of its point. And there is some blood. I wouldn't say it's a bloodletting. There's some somewhat disturbing things, but I have to admit, Hilliard does a really good job with the artwork, in that a lot of the actual, violence kind of takes place off screen, which I actually found really, really interesting, because it makes it kind of more shocking and disturbing that you don't actually see everything. A lot of it is done off screen, or done, kind of off, like behind the back and things like that, which actually, benefits, the story, because it becomes, disturbing instead of like, just like a bloodletting. So this book's not going to be for everyone, but I think it's intriguing. It's got some interesting ideas here. I think it's worth checking out. Not a huge high recommendation, but a good recommendation. Next up, we have Wonder Woman Black and Gold #1. Continuing the giant, Black and Another Color Fiesta, but now this time with Wonder Woman. So this first issue has 4 stories. The first one is written by A.J. Mendez with artwork by Ming Doyle. The next one is Nadia Seamus writing with artwork by Morgan Beam. The next one is written by John Arcudi with artwork by Ryan Sook. And the final story is written and drawn by Amy Reeder. Once again, yes, we're being inundated with these, but there's 2 really good things about it. First, it allows creative teams to, kind of do any sort of story. There really are no boundaries. The only boundary is obviously, it's basically black and white artwork with gold or yellow highlights. So there's that. But one thing that I love short stories. I've talked about it many times before because I think you can tell really interesting stories when you have a limited space. So it doesn't allow you to you really have to get down to the brass tacks with your story. And then it also allows artists that, maybe can't do a monthly book or, a miniseries or something like that. It allows them to draw, a character, in this case, Wonder Woman, that they maybe have always wanted to draw, but not really had that chance. So, and then the final thing that's really great about these, it's really great for new readers, like people who like Wonder Woman, they've maybe seen the film, but they go into comic shop and they're kind of overwhelmed. There's like this week's Wonder Woman that is like the 5th part of a story, and that's not really new reader friendly, where these books are incredibly new reader friendly, because there's no continuity. It's standalone stories. So the first one, Mother's Daughter, is really interesting because it has to do with, her and her mom, and it's actually a really amusing story. That I really have to give Mendez props, because he comes up with basically a parent's child story that's actually really nice, and I really liked Doyle's artwork. It really is nice, and it's basically just like a dialogue sort of story that works really well. The next one by Seamus and Beam is really, really interesting. It has a very indie look to it, and I really like that. And I also liked how the color was used on that particular one. It really was just an intriguing story, and it kind of had a mythology tinge to it, which has always been a big part of Wonder Woman, and I think they used it well. The next story by Arcudi and Sook is really wonderful. The artwork is absolutely fantastic, and it's actually a really nice sentimental story, and it also touches upon the fact that, not that Wonder Woman is immortal per se, but obviously she ages at a very different rate than a normal human does. So that's the crux of that story, and it's really, really intriguing. I really, really like that a lot. And like I said, the story was really good. The artwork Ryan Sook's artwork is just absolutely gorgeous. The final story by Amy Reeder is great because first of all, it has Etta Candy, which, we haven't, we don't really see her a lot. She was more in the older stories, and it's classic Etta Candy. And it's also classic Wonder Woman because it's not necessarily set like in the 40s, but it has that kind of feel to it. And I really like that Reeder not only did that with the tone of the story, but the artwork has that kind of has that retro, 40s, feel in both the story and the artwork. And it was a lot of fun. Like I said, Etta, having Etta is great. And it was really just a fun little story. Once again, you got 4 stories. They're all good. They're all winners. And I can't wait to see, what other talent they have lined up for the next story. So it'll be really interesting. Next up, we have Marvel Voices Pride #1. There's a lot here that we have to get through. So there's an introduction written by Luciano Vecchio and Mike Sullivan. There's a story by Mariko Tamaki and Chris Anika with artwork by Anika. Next up, we have Leah Sturgis writing with Derek Charm in the artwork. We have Alan Heinberg, story, Jim Chung on the artwork, Kieran Gillen with a story, Jen Hickman with artwork, Terry Blass with story, and Paulina Genshu and Kendall Good on artwork. Then we have Crystal Frazier with Jethro Morales. Then we have Anthony Oliveira writing with Javier Garon artwork. Then there's a story and artwork by J.J. Kirby. There's a story by Tinny Howard and Samantha Dodge. Then we have Aaliyah Williams writing and Jan Bazaldua with the artwork. Steve Orlando writing with Claudia Aguri artwork. Vita Ilea with writing the story with Jonah Isep and Brittany Williams on the artwork, and the final story by Jacopo Kamenji. Now, this is, obviously, DC's been doing Pride Month, and Marvel, to a lesser extent, has been doing it. Their big thing was really this special. And in a lot of ways, it was like the DC. It's really nice. There's really good stories. I think having, gay characters, LGBTQ characters represented in mainstream comics, I think is very important. I think, the more diversity that we have in characters and creators, I think is really an important thing. But once again, these stories are all nice. There's none of them are bad or anything, but they're just, it kind of was like the DC Pride special where they're all nice and everything, but I don't think they have a huge impact beyond the LGBTQ community. That is not, I'm not degrading the stories or the artwork or anything like that. The talent is really good here. I think there's, great diversity in stories. I think the artwork is exceptionally diverse. There's lots of different styles, which is really great. But I think that, none of the stories were ultimately that captivating. Like I said, they're good and everything, but they kind of don't land. They don't really necessarily stay with you as you're reading it. It's like, this is nice and everything. There's lots of, different characters and and all that and everything, but nothing really sticks with you after you're done. And I think it kind of, once again, had the same problem as the DC, that there wasn't any of the stories that were hugely memorable. There wasn't anything that's like, they're really kind of stuck with you. Once again, enjoyable while you're reading it, but when you're done, you're like, okay, that was nice. So, but again, I think a book like this is absolutely very important, to show that there is a diversity of characters and there are, important LGBTQ stories that are within, say, the Marvel universe. So, it's kind of a catch-22. I think it is well worth checking out, even at $10. I think it's worth checking out if the subject matter interests you, or if you're looking for something, with a lot of, different writers and artists and things like that. You might want to flip through it at your local comic shop to see if it, kind of jives with you. But overall, it's a minor recommendation in that respect. And of course the $10 cover price, as with DC's, is kind of a deciding factor for a lot of people in their budget. Next up, we have Spawn Universe #1, written by Todd McFarlane, with artwork by Jim Chung, Brett Booth, Steven Sukova, and Marco Takara. Now, this is a kickoff to 3 new Spawn books that are coming out later in the next few months. And I'll be honest, I have not read Spawn for a long time. And I'll also be very honest that, the last time I read it, I won't say that McFarlane's a great artist. He's really a really good artist. But on the writing, not so good. He's not terrible, but he's not great. So the question kind of comes down to, if you haven't read it for a long time, is this a decent place to start? I would say yes and no, in the sense of it's still Spawn. It's nice, but not anything that was, really made me jump up and down as far as the stories go. They're all nice and everything, and he does his thing. He does Spawn, and there's like, the different variations. There's, like Gunslinger Spawn, there's Hell Spawn, there's the female Spawn. So, they're just variations on Spawn, which is nothing new. But, the thing is, it's like, it's all nice and everything, but I think if you're not a huge Spawn fan, I don't think this book is really going to convince you otherwise. Now, it's very possible that some of the books that spin out of this might be interesting and everything, but I think my other problem was I don't think this was well set up for new readers, in the sense of you kind of have to know at least Spawn. Maybe if you've seen the movie, you have a rough idea of who Spawn is. But McFarlane didn't take the time to make this, say, new reader friendly, which I think is a bit of a, kind of a missed opportunity, in the sense of if you're trying to get people to come back into Spawn, I don't know that this book is really going to convince anybody who's either a lapsed reader or was never a big fan of Spawn. Now, for regular readers of Spawn, they're probably going to love this. But for me, it was okay. I will say the one thing is the artwork was really, really nice overall. Chung did the main story, and then Booth, Sequoia, and Takaro did the individual stories of, the female Spawn, the Gunslinger Spawn, and the Hell Spawn. So that's where they did that. And the artwork actually is really, really nice. For me, it actually kind of helped the story along a little bit, but overall, it didn't convince me that I necessarily need to read Spawn. I will give the individual, titles a swing, but this wasn't, for me, super convincing. Next up, we have Gamma Flight #1, written by Al Ewing and Crystal Frazier, with artwork by Lan Mendia. Now, I haven't been reading Immortal Hulk lately, mostly because I'm just waiting for a big omnibus of the whole thing. But, the question comes down to, there is a thing in the first page in the front kind of tells you what this team is. They're kind of, they've all been affected by Gamma at one way or the other, whether it's affected them physically or that, they were part of a, secret group studying, gamma radiation on people. But it's also kind of like a new version of kind of Alpha Flight, but, Gamma Flight. And, once again, it certainly wasn't bad. I mean, I actually, what I've read of the Immortal Hulk by Al Ewing is really great. But the problem here is it's not necessarily bad, but it's just, this is standard superhero stuff. And with so many books coming out, it wasn't really anything compelling for me to like read the second issue. It was all nice and everything. It did its job. I will say Mendia's artwork is actually really nice. That was actually a big plus, but the story was just so basic and average that you just like, okay, that's nice. Next, and then you just go on to the next book. So, when you have a mediocre story, you can have really nice artwork, which is the case here, but it just really falls flat because there's really nothing to, kind of go with. Now, if you're a big fan of Immortal Hulk, this might have worked out better, but I would say if you're not really familiar with this, I'd say this is a skip. Next up, we have Batman Reptilian #1, written by Garth Ennis, with artwork by Liam Sharp. Now, I want to preface this. Originally, apparently, this story was written for Steve Dillon, who passed away from cancer. And so Liam Sharp in the beginning had said, explained that he took over the project at the request of Ennis to do it, and because he knew Steve Dillon. So it was nice that this book has come to light. Obviously, it was something that was planned quite a while ago, but now it's just taken a while with Liam Sharp doing the art. This is definitely a Black Label book in the sense of it's definitely out of continuity. It's its own beast. And what's interesting about this is that it's more definitely on the out there front, in the sense of it's really got like a wild premise, and Liam Sharp's artwork is actually really, the best way to describe it is kind of like, not that he's mimicking Bill Sienkiewicz, but it's like out there in the sense of the proportions are unusual and everything, but it actually works really well for the story. And the story is actually really interesting. Gets off, this first issue is kind of a setup that the villains, kind of get together every month to try to defeat Batman, but they can never quite decide. But now we find out that, two of the villains, Riddler and Penguin, have been murdered. Now, who's murdered them, we don't know. But, the henchmen are like, freaking out. They don't know what to do, and so that's kind of what this setup is, that there's not so much, like a new villain, but what's happening to Batman's rogue gallery. So that's the basic premise here of, what's going on. So we don't quite know what's going on in this first issue, but it's definitely a setup. Ennis does a really nice job of, setting everything up, but moving the story along. He's been writing for a long time, so he knows how to do it. So it doesn't get bogged down with exposition that keeps the story from, like, kind of not moving along well. And then Liam Sharp's artwork is just absolutely stunning here. He's actually painting this book, which he hasn't done in quite a while, and it's really nice to see him do that. He did Wonder Woman, he did a Brave and the Bold miniseries, which he wrote and drew, which was absolutely fantastic. But allowing him to paint the artwork really gives this book a unique and amazing look. And it's not going to be for everybody, the style that he's using, but it fits the story like a glove, and that's what it should do. The artist should feel like he can do a style that fits a story, and that's that's why this book works so well, is because the story's really great, and Liam picked up on all those elements of that story and put it in that painted artwork. It's I really enjoyed it. If you're looking for definitely, a different Batman story, this is one to definitely check out. Next up, we have Black Hammer Reborn #1, written by Jeff Lemire, with artwork by Caitlin Yarsky. Now, this is a new series that gets back to the main Black Hammer storyline, with Black Hammer's daughter. Now she is the Black Hammer, and so it's set from the events in the first main story arc of the main characters, and so it's many years later, and she's not, for the most part, villains aren't, as rampant as they used to be. And she's kind of retired, and she's, got a family and everything. But, as with always, things never stay, calm for long. And that's the basic setup here, where, her life is not what she thought. And it's kind of like, she thought she'd given up being, a hero, but, it's not that simple. I really like it. As you know, I'm a huge fan of Black Hammer, and I'm glad that we're, as much as I love the miniseries and they're great stories, I'm glad we're back to the main story here. And I will say, at first I missed Dean Ormstrom. He was the main artist on the main story. He is coming back. He's working on a side series. So that is where Yarsky comes in doing the artwork. And I think it's a really nice job. Does a really good job of capturing the feel of the Black Hammer universe, and makes it, it's a nice compliment to what Ormston had done in the first series. So it this is going to be more of a long form story, kind of back to the main group, as what's left of the main group. I don't want to really give much away, but the question also comes down to, if you haven't been reading that, can you kind of pick this up? And I think you can, because once again, this is a new part of the storyline. Everything you need to know about her being Black Hammer is all. Lemire does a great job of explaining it while the story moves along. It doesn't how do I say it? it doesn't give you everything, but it gives you enough to know what's going on reading this story, which is very important. And I'll go back to Yarsky's artwork is really nice, does a great job here. If you haven't been reading Black Hammer, I think this is a pretty decent jumping on point and giving it a shot. And I'm guessing, once you read a Black Hammer, you're going to go back and just start devouring all the regular series and the mini series. That's my hope, because I really love this book and it deserves to be read by as many people as possible. So a high recommendation for me. Next up, we have Infinite Frontier #1, written by Joshua Williamson, with artwork by Zermanico. Now, there was a special that came out, it's been at least a month, if not two, that this has rolled out of death metal, future state, now we're in Infinite Frontier. So what this particular book is dealing with is that, we had multiverses, then we didn't have multiverse, there was Crisis on Crisis on Infinite Earths, so we have all these, multiverse, not multiverse, multi. So we're back to having multiverse, but they're all kind of, they all know that they have multiverses. So that's what this miniseries is attempting to kind of put together, is that, there's all these, different heroes and stuff, Captain Carrot, the Black Superman who's president. So it has all these characters, and they're trying to make sure that the multiverse doesn't collapse on itself. That's kind of the basic premise. And I don't want to really give too much away, but obviously Flash going through the different multiverses runs into somebody that obviously is going to play an important part. And then Speedy, once again, you have multiple Flash, you have multiple Speedies, and so all this stuff is going to somewhat crash together, and, we're going to see what happens. Williamson has a really big job here of taking all this stuff from all these previous things and trying to, kind of, at a point, put a story to it. And I'll give it to him. He's actually done a really nice job here of keeping it balanced and, but the question is, if you don't know about the multiverse, you haven't read all this other stuff, can you still read this? I think you can. I felt like, because it's been so long since the Zero special that, I didn't really remember most of that stuff. So I felt, decently reading it. I think you do need to kind of at least have an understanding of the DC, universe multiverse. But, with that being said, I think you can pick this up. I think it's a decent read. It didn't blow me away, but I did enjoy it. It's kind of an event story, but I didn't find it where I felt I needed to read, 12 other, issues of stuff. With that being said, the one plus is Zermanico's artwork is really, really nice here. And, he does a really good job of drawing, pretty much the DC universe, DC multiverse characters. And that's the other thing. You kind of get a taste of, these different multiverse characters, which is kind of nice if you know all this stuff. If you don't, once again, I think they explain who's who and, kind of what's going on. But visually, it's a really nice looking book. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the best place to start for this whole thing, but I think you can read it, even if you haven't been reading a lot of the other stuff. Next up, we have Fantastic Four Life Story #2, The 70s, written by Mark Russell with artwork by Sean Isaacs. To say, look, I'll get this out of the way. I love Mark Russell's writing. He's a brilliant writer. He's just written many, many brilliant stories. He did The Flintstones. He did Snagglepuss. He's done Billionaire Island. He's done tons of stuff. Second Coming. But this is his first Marvel work, as far as I know. And the first issue I really love. So what he's doing is he's telling the story of the Fantastic Four, but playing with different time periods. So obviously the first one was in the 60s when, the Fantastic Four appeared. But what he's doing, and what's interesting is he's following the storyline, but not necessarily the period that storyline was written. And he's also kind of, the best way to describe it's like looking at it, but at a slightly different angle. So in this case, Reed and Doom are actually working together. We haven't actually seen Galactus, but there's also these stories that he's kind of inserting into the known storyline, but slightly changing things. Like at one point, Reed and Sue get divorced because she's tired of him, not paying attention, not acknowledging her. So, that's kind of a different take. And, there's just lots of different things. He's spinning a lot of plates here, but once again, he's also using the period of the 70s. So, you have, Sue calling Reed on a payphone. Well, obviously that happened in the 70s. So, he's playing fast and loose with the rough story. But what I find most interesting is the things that he's adding to the story. It's more like he's embellishing. He's not changing. He's embellishing what was already there and adding, kind of filling in parts that, kind of are more character driven instead of, oh, we're just going to go fight Mole Man, So that's the basic premise here. I really, really, Isaac's art is actually really, really nice in this book. He does a great job of capturing the period, but not making kind of a big deal out of it. He does a really good job of, the clothing styles and things like that. So he's done research. He did that with the 60s. And of course, next issue is the 80s. So it'll be interesting, excuse me, to see where he takes that visually. I'm really excited. I'm really enjoying this. I think if you're a fan of the Fantastic Four, this is really great because it's a standalone story. It's not in continuity, but it's embellishing on what we already know. So I think that's really interesting. I think you should check it out. I'm really enjoying this. Next up, we have Blue Flame #2, written by Christopher Cantwell, with artwork by Adam Gorham. Now, I thought the first issue was kind of okay, and I was willing to give it a chance. And this second issue kind of falls into the same category. I think it's interesting. I think there's some good ideas here, but it never quite elevates to like where, wow, that was really interesting. I think the concept's interesting. So you have the first issue, you have the main hero getting kidnapped. He's on apparently another planet, and he's going to defend the Earth. Or this consortium of planets will destroy it because they're not worthy. Once again, a basic plot element. But there's also what's happening on the real world where the kind of Justice League type group was at a car show, and there was a guy that tried to kill them all. Now he is still alive and in a coma, but the ultimate question is, and I'll be honest, I think this is spoiler. This is my personal opinion. I think what it is he's in a coma in this issue because he's going to live and everything. But I don't know that this other world story, I think it might just be taking place in his mind. Either way, even if that's not the story, it's kind of okay. Cantwell he's an okay writer. I don't think there's anything that I've read of his that really blows me away. Gorham's artwork is okay. There's some inconsistencies, but overall it's okay. That's the thing. The book's okay. I don't think we're going to be going for a third issue on this one. I can't. I'm not overly impressed, and there's too many other good books to be buying right now. Next up, we have Harley Quinn #4. Written by Stephanie Phillips with artwork by Riley Rossmo. Now, I haven't necessarily I think it started off really decent, but I think it hit a bit of a lull. This issue actually kind of brings it back. I think part of the problem is that it's not that the idea of having Harley kind of become a hero and everything. That's the concept's okay. I think where I'm struggling with this. I think Phillips is kind of taking a bit too long to tell this story. We're 4 issues in and, it's moving along, but I don't think it's moving along at a pace that it should be. I think at this point, whatever's going to happen next issue probably should have, I think this story could have possibly been 4 issues. I don't know when the end of this first storyline is, but so far I think it could have been condensed down a little bit. I will say that, the one thing that's selling me on this whole thing is Riley Rossmo's artwork. I mean, that guy could draw the phone book and I'd probably buy it. And he is doing the best he can. I think visually, he's really he's really helping Philip's story move along. And that has been a big plus visually. Now, his style is not going to be for everybody, so that's kind of a different issue. But I will say this issue was kind of the one where it was a bit more enjoyable than the last few issues. The opening with Harley playing chess with Trash with Solomon Grundy was pretty hilarious. But, once again, it was all neat and everything, but I don't know that it really, was important to the story. And I think that's where I'm struggling with. I think Philip's just, I think there's good ideas here. I think the execution's a little on the iffy side. But, it does have the Riley Rossmo artwork, so that's a plus. So that's where it lands. I mean, I'm liking it, but I'm kind of disappointed. Next up, we have X-Men Legends #4, written by Louise Simonson and artwork by Walt Simonson. Now, the X-Men Legend books are stories by their original creators of the time, and they're doing kind of a story that would fit into, say, continuity whenever. Each issue explains where the story takes place. Once again, you don't have to know where this story takes place. You just have to know that it's that team from that era. That's all you need to know. And as I was kind of disappointed with the first issue, the second issue story was pretty much about the same. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's okay. I mean, it's nice to see these characters back in that. But the problem with the Louise's story is it's just really basic. And that's all nice and everything, but really, I'll be honest, I'm buying it, because Walt Simonson did the artwork, and Walt Simonson is just a freaking amazing artist. He's still got it, all these years later, and it's just okay, and that's, it's there's the nostalgia of it, but otherwise, if this was like something, like they were, like, oh, this is the start of a book, you'd be like, okay, that's nice. Once again, standard stuff. Nice artwork, but pretty standard. Next up, we have Stray Dogs #5, written by Tony Fleece with artwork by Trish Forstner. Now, this is the end of the story, and I really can't reveal anything because, every part of this story is the end. So, all I can say is that there is an ending to this story. That things turn out well for most of the dogs. How do I put this? But it does. It has the thing about that I've really liked about this is not only that that it has kind of a neat horror aspect and it's told from the dog's point of view, but I think what's most interesting about it is that it's a self-contained story. It had a beginning, middle, and end, and I really have to give Fleece props because. It did exactly what it set out to do. It started out with this premise and it followed through and had a nice ending. It never felt rushed. It never felt padded. It just was right in both, with the story, how it was told. And that, you just don't see that. Like it was just, I really have to give props to Fleece because he knew what he wanted and he did exactly that. And it was very satisfying. I mean, that's why it's been so good is it's just been exceptionally satisfying and you look forward to each issue. And again, Forster does a really nice job of, like it kind of has that, animation, it does have an animation look, with kind of a cartoony thing, but that's why I think the book has worked so well because it is kind of a fantasy story and having that, fantasy animation type look really captures the tone and the feel of the story. Because I think if it had been done in kind of a more realistic way, I don't know that it would have worked as well. And that's why, Fleece and Forstner, like they've just melded so well together with both the story and the art that you're just like, it's just good. It's just really good. And so if you've missed this, I know that, they've reprinted the issues a number of times. There is a trade paperback that will be coming out soon. So, so if you missed it, just wait, get the trade paperback, it'll have everything in it. So, but I've really enjoyed this series. It's just been very enjoyable, and it's been a book that has that rare thing of looking forward to each month. So that has been a big plus. Next up, we have Batman Superman number 19, written by Jean Luen Yang. Now, there's a lot of guest artists filling in this issue. So we have Emanuela Lupacino penciling with Matt Strani doing the inks. Then we have artwork by Steve Lieber. Then we have Derek Robertson, and then we have Kyle Hotz. So Ivan Reis he's been the main artist, but obviously he took a break this issue, so he had kind of a round robin. But what was neat about it, and we're still in the kind of movie timeline where there's multiple timelines. So obviously with the cover, yes, we go back to the Wild Wild West, and we actually see a version of El Diablo, which has been a character in the DC universe. It's been under a different number of iterations, but this one's kind of the Wild West version. So what's interesting is the story's broken up where they kind of they jumped around. So you see Alana Strange, and so that each one's done by different artists. So you don't actually notice the shift in tone, in the visuals with a different artist style, because they're jumping to like a different thing. So it's actually a really smart way to do, when you have this many guest artists. So it was a really smart move on Yang's part. I mean, this story, the time jumping has been throughout this whole like movie tone, this movie visual that he's been doing with the story. So having the different artists was perfect. So so we now finally get to find out that where the whole movie thing has come from, and we really start to learn kind of what the villain is after. And this has been just a really, really fun story. And I've said it, before, I'll say it again. Teaming up Superman and Batman doesn't make a lot of sense, but somehow Yang has figured this whole thing out with this story. And it just really, I'm really just having a lot of fun with it, which I haven't had a lot of fun with them, for quite a while. So that's a big plus. All the artists have really done a great job. I mean, it's just, it's like, they're all just so talented, and they have, different styles, but, but it works so well. And I just really, I'm a big fan of all the artwork in this. And I really have to say that each one's done a great job, and in a lot of ways, they complement each other. And like I said, it's a rare thing that you have that many styles and you're able to pull that off. And bravo to like all the artists on this. They did a really great job. Next up, we have Shadecraft number 4, written by Joe Henderson with artwork by Lee Garbett. Now, this has been a very interesting story in the sense of that the girl has the ability to manipulate shadows, and we found out last issue that the shadow that she thought was her brother was not her brother, but now we find out it probably was her brother. And then now we also find out in this issue that she's not the only one that has powers. Apparently her mom has powers. So there's a whole backstory with her mom having powers, and now the two kids apparently have the powers. So even though her brother's in a coma, that may be why, he was in the accident, because of the powers. We also find out that, not a big shock, but the secret government group is involved with this. The mom used to work for the group. She left the group. Now, apparently they have found her and they found the kids, and that's where we land with the story. So I really have to give Henderson that, in a lot of ways, a lot of these plot points are very basic and the tropes we've seen a million times before. But, I'm not saying that that he's really delivered a unique twist, but I think it's enough of a twist that has made it interesting enough to kind of keep going and to keep coming back each month, which is not an easy task when you're dealing with, kind of basic, somewhat comic book tropes. So I have to give him that script wise, he's doing a good job of like at least making it feel somewhat different enough. Garbett's artwork is really, just really fantastic. And the way he's able to the really the big win is how he captures the shadows and everything. And it just really, it's a good looking book. The story's been good, and it's interesting enough that I kind of want to see where they take either the entire story, at least this first story arc. So it continues to be a book that I think is still worth checking out. Next up, we have Jonah and the Unpossible Monsters, written by Chris Samny and Laura Samny, with artwork by Chris Samny. So we've led up to where, the girls found, her brother, and we find, he's kind of like, the best way to kind of describe it, he's like Tarzan. He got lost, and, he's kind of like a little kid Tarzan. So they've met up with this group of people that have been able to, they're trying to kill the monsters and stuff like that. So they kind of have this underground. So the last issue, they get attacked by a being monster, and they're fighting it, and it's not going well. Then we find out that apparently Jonah is like Superman, but like in a baby package. So that's kind of where we're at. And, this is just a really good all ages book. I think it's going to be those ones where, I think it's going to do better. I think it's going to be a much more popular as a trade than as a monthly issue, because part of it is, these short, each issue is almost these short little chunks of a story, and they're great and everything. But when you get to, when I get to the end of the issue, I kind of want more, where I think overall it's going to work better when you read it at once. It's not that you can't remember what's happened. I think it's just, it's just going to play better that way. So I think, it's one of those things. If you haven't been reading it, wait for the trade. But I really do enjoy it. And I really have to say, I love Chris Samney's artwork. He's a great artist, and they're delivering, him and his wife are delivering a fun story with really nice artwork. And it's a great all ages book. And finally, we have Wonder Woman number 774, written by Michael W. Conrad and Becky Cloonan, with artwork by Andy McDonald. And then there's the Young Diana backup by Jordi Belair, with artwork by Paulina Ganshu. Now, this is still continuing the storyline. So we had the first arc of the story, which was she was trapped in Asgard. Now that she has now gone to Olympus, but she's gotten to Olympus, and all the gods are missing. We think they're dead. We're not sure. We don't quite know what's going on. So that's what this issue is dealing with, is what's happened with the gods. So she basically has to go to hell to find out, are they there? What's going on? Are they dead? If they're dead, can she rescue them? So that's kind of where we are with the Olympus, this kind of first part of the Olympus of this continuing storyline. Conrad and Cloonan are still delivering really, really, a really interesting story. It's a long haul story, but each issue does a nice job of continuing it. I think, it's one of those, it's a bit of an, kind of an epic storyline, but they do deliver quite well in each issue. I really have to give Conrad and Cloonan that they continue the momentum really well. And it's a really well-paced storyline for now we're into 5 chapters. So I have to give now, Travis Moore did the artwork on the Asgard. Now we have Andy McDonald doing the artwork on the Olympian, and it's different, but I think it definitely fits in that realm of style. And I think it also makes sense because we're in a different area to have a different artist kind of take over this storyline. So I do like McDonald's artwork, and it really does complement the story really well. And I'll say it again, I really like the Young Diana, backup by Belair and Gaucho, but I just don't know that it fits. I mean, I really like it. I think it just would be better as either a standalone, or in the case of it, maybe it should have been one of those young adult books. But once again, it's good. I just don't know that it fits with the main storyline, which is a shame because it is so good. That's going to do it for this. There was a lot to get to. Sorry it was so long, a little long-winded. The anthologies really take a lot of time because got to kind of explain stuff. So anyways, public service announcement, as always, get my shop at your local comic shop, support your local comic shop. I get mine at Pulp Fiction Comics in Long Beach, California, where Ryan and Annie and Eduardo are really great. Ryan owns the store. He's great. He's just fabulous. And it's a really great store. They have a sister store in Culver City, Pulp Fiction Culver City, run by Chris and her team. Another great store. Both stores offer great discounts, pull service, and it's just, once again, it's great to support your local comic shop. As always, please, if you haven't got vaccinated, please get vaccinated. We're starting to see things possibly maybe getting a little worse with the new strain, but please take care of yourself, be safe, wear your mask, social distance. I still think it's very important right now, even with things going well. And always, please be kind to each other. It's still tough out there. So being kind doesn't cost anything, and it really helps everyone. So anyways, take care of yourselves. We'll see you again next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.